Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Admiral, on page 9 of your testimony, you clearly, I think, wanted to convey a point of highlighting the advances in undersea warfare in the Asia-Pacific area, which, again, Mr. Forbes' question sort of alluded to. You know, one question I hear all the time from other members is, you know, why do we need submarines? And, you know, aren't they Cold War relics? Again, your testimony, again, suggests that actually there's something changing out there. And I just was wondering if you could sort of, you know, maybe elaborate a little bit more than your prior answers in terms of just how submarines fit into a modern security strategy.
Well, I would disagree with anyone that said that they're Cold War relics. The modern submarine force of today, first, is globally deployable. It's a highly proficient force, and it does things well beyond what people would think from a Cold War perspective. They are significant in intelligence and reconnaissance collection. They have long-range strike capability when necessary. They have the ability to carry special forces and special operating forces into denied areas. They have the ability to use the asymmetric advantage of stealth under the ocean and able to be a force multiplier for a force or a nation that has global interest, particularly as you talk about maritime domain and ensuring that we have proper access. You know, it's always widely reported that 95% of everything that moves on the global economy moves on the ocean. That's true. What's not reported is in the last decade or so, that number has quadrupled. And so whether it's energy or whether it's the things that need to be supplied to local stores in our country, it is the global economy runs on the oceans. And so to cede that to anyone at any time is not in our best interest. Submarines have a significant play in making sure that we have freedom of access to our national interest.
Great. Thank you. That was a very good statement that I think is helpful as we, again, have to always deal with competing priorities here. You know, on page 28 of your testimony, you talked about, again, the need for bilateral and multilateral communication, collaboration, as you said, is really what the pivot to Asia-Pacific is really about. At the end of January, there was an incident in East China Sea where it was reported that Chinese frigate locked weapons on Japanese vessels. And there's obviously now this sort of competing dispute about whether it really happened or whether it did happen. And I mean, you know, to me, that's sort of where, you know, the success of whether or not collaboration is going to work in terms of whether or not we've got systems here for making sure everybody's communicating well and understands what's going on out there. And, you know, the last thing in the world is that we want an incident like this to escalate into something where we're going to be sort of involved. And I just wonder if you could sort of comment, not necessarily about what actually happened there, but, you know, how do we get ahead of these kinds of, because there's a lot of congestion out there, is what we're hearing this morning, to make sure that we don't sort of run into these incidents that spin out of control.
Well, because I wasn't actually at the scene when it occurred, but it was reported by the Japanese forces, and I think subsequently denied by the Chinese. First, that type of activity is highly escalatory. By mature navies, it's recognized as something that you don't do unless you're directed to do it, and it's because it's a move towards greater hostilities. I believe that if it had occurred, that the Japanese would have been able to detect it. Their Navy and their military is sophisticated enough to be able to understand what was being done. And I have been complimentary of the Japanese command and control and their ability to maintain a level of calm and as they work through this very difficult, challenging security issue they're dealing with. And I think that is indicative of the close alliance relationship we've had in building our navies and our militaries together in that alliance to understand each other. And so I think that kind of worked. And we have I have very close communication with the Japanese leadership on the military side of these issues, and I'm quite comfortable with that. Now, on the Chinese side, we're trying to create these avenues. We've been successful in the last couple of years, I think, historically successful in being able to keep our mill-to-mill relationships going, even through periods of time when we disagree as a nation. I mean, you don't have a superpower and a rising power that won't have competition and won't have friction. The question is, how do you manage that friction so that it's productive rather than negative? So we're opening venues. We have a tremendous number of high-level engagements. I've been to Beijing twice just in the last year to talk to my counterparts. I've had them come to Hawaii. So we're improving in our dialogue. There's more to do, much more to do, and much more to do, I think, at the tactical level of being able to have that near-term voice-to-voice communication, mill-to-mill with the Chinese that we quite frankly don't have yet, but that we're working towards.
Thank you, Admiral.